Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Pam with Perfectly Holistic, and I am so excited to have one of my friends, Dr. Odette Suter, back with us today to talk about cats and fiber, which we've agreed was such an important topic. And I have so many people that have agreed with us and are excited to be here today to listen to what you have to say. So, welcome back, Dr. Suter. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about this, although a little nervous as well because, well, fiber is a big topic and there's a lot of information. And when you look at some of the research that's been done in that regard, it's actually, hold on, let me just share a link real quick to my Facebook.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
To be able to multitask.
I know it's tech is definitely difficult for me, so I,
Yeah,
I, I feel you.
I tried to do what you asked, what you suggested, but I was afraid that I was going to get kicked out. So, anyways,
No
okay,
worries. No
okay,
worries at all.
yeah. So, anyways, when they do research on fiber, there are so many questions that come up. What are they feeding otherwise?
Hmm.
How healthy are the animals? What is the microbiome doing? I mean, there's so many moving factors that I'm not sure they're really taking into consideration when they're doing the research. So then that makes it really difficult to interpret the research, the
Right.
studies, and make conclusions. And oftentimes, at the end of the research, we may, or this may work or whatever. It's like
Right.
they're not really committed to making a statement or anything like that. And what I also noticed as I was scouring the research is that a lot of these studies are only using small samples,
Samples.
group animals. Yeah, it's like four. I'm
Huh.
like, really? You're doing a study with four animals and then you're gonna, I mean, sure, write about it if you feel like it, but it's like, oh my God, how can you come to any conclusion from that?
Yeah, with only four, that
Yeah,
doesn't even feel like a study.
I
That
know, I
sounds
know. That's like
like
an
a science
experiment or
experiment.
something. Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, as I'm doing a bit more microbiome research right now in preparation for a conference where I'm doing some lectures and at the Holistic Veterinary Conference.
Yes.
Um, it's just there's so much unknown and there's again so many moving factors that
Hmm.
it just really we're kind of getting to even more of a point of realizing that we know so little or nothing really.
True.
And so that everything then makes it really challenging. Like for example with fiber, um, that what they usually how they check what fiber do in the body is how they affect the microbiota, all these microbes in the large intestine, particularly in the colon,
Hmm.
and also those short chain fatty acids, because fibers get fermented by the microbes in the colon, and as a result they make short chain fatty acids, and then they measure the short chain fatty acid amount, but some of them are being absorbed and don't actually end up in the poop. So it's like, well, how do you know how much there actually is if you can't really measure it? And
That's true.
and I mean, certainly in practice, measuring certain things like that are impossible just because it requires special equipment and it's expensive and so on. So,
Yeah.
in the meantime, we have to sort of figure out on our own a little bit of what works and what doesn't work. And again, it's so individual. One animal may do really well with extra fiber, another may not. And, it's very similar to human diets. I mean, there are like a gazillion of them, and everybody thinks that their diet is the diet,
Hmm.
but it's so individual. One person will do really well with, I don't know, Jerusalem artichoke, which it has a lot of fiber in
Right.
it that could nourish the microbes, and another person may have gas from it.
Right.
So I think
So
we
I,
need to kind of shift to more of an individualized sort of approach.
right. And I think that, like you were saying, with some of these, since it is such a diverse results and testing and things like that, maybe we should look more at the anecdotal evidence of, well, for this person it did, and for this cat it did, and this, it doesn't
Mhm.
mean it's going to work for your cat, but this is what's worked for this one. So it gives people like a broad options, like here's your list of things to try, see what your cat's body likes, see
Mhm.
what gives you results.
Mhm.
Since there are so many moving parts and different factors to keep involved or keep in mind, because like you said, there are different types of fiber, and not every type is the best for every body.
Mhm.
It is very individualized.
Yeah, yeah, and then it very much depends on, what kind of microbes are present too, because they're the ones processing it.
Yeah.
Um, and so, there are a lot of animals that don't tolerate a lot of fiber because it throws off their microbiome, and then they, have issues.
Yep.
Um, so, yeah, it has to be individualized. And with cats, the other thing is too that, a lot of the fibers that we think may be beneficial come in a form that is not palatable to them,
Hmm.
or that they're like, yeah, I'm not eating that. You're trying to
Right.
poison me, and they can be very opinionated about this type of, um, you know, approach to
Yeah.
eat it.
No, it's true because a vet once told me one time, he said it has to be their idea. You
Yeah,
know, you
exactly.
have to get their buy-in. And if
Yeah.
you don't have their buy-in, it's not going to work no matter how much you sugarcoat it and try to
Mhm.
hide it or whatever. If they don't like it, they're, like you said, they're not going to eat it.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything in particular that can help put better diversity in the microflora of those pets or cats that don't necessarily have some of the microbes necessary to digest certain fibers? So, in that kind of situation, what would you recommend?
Well, certainly if a cat isn't eating a lot of fiber already, I mean, they don't need as much fiber in the same way as we humans do, or a cow, for example. I
Sure.
mean, they basically live off of fiber, um, because they have the potential or the ability to break it down. Although, even though the cat's colon is quite short, they
Hmm.
have a huge amount of microbes in there as well, and they are quite capable of fermenting fibers much more than we think. Um, Maybe not quite like a cow, but still, they are capable of fermenting quite a bit of fiber. What was the question that you asked?
Like, how would you bring more diversity to their gut if they don't have enough diversity?
Yeah, so definitely you'd want to slowly transition to adding more diet fiber, because anytime you change diet, you change the microbiome as well. Because if you're starting to introduce a lot of fiber and there are no microbes there to process
Hmm.
fiber, then that's a problem. But if we slowly introduce it, and slowly increase, then these microbes that may only have been kind of like the minority,
Right.
basically,
Right.
um, they may start to proliferate a little bit more because now there's food coming. So they can take over a little bit, and,
Hmm.
and grow in numbers. And that can be helpful to do it that way, slowly
Yep. So
introduce
let's
more.
let's. I'm going to back up for a second. Let's talk about, should cats have fiber?
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, in nature, well, I'm just saying that. What do I know? uh,
Wild cats, though, are cousins.
yeah,
Natural cousins.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, wildcats, they tend to get, or well, not so wild cats. I mean, the ones that are just roaming around. I mean, my neighbors have three cats that roam
Mhm.
around. But
Right.
anyways, they get their fiber. Well, they get junk food as well.
Right.
But they also hunt mice and other little rodents, and so
Mhm.
they get a lot of fiber that way as well, because hair is fiber,
Mhm.
collagen, like tendons, ligaments, cartilages. That's all has fiber in it as well, and so they get fiber through that. And they did a study with cheetahs, and where they took 14 cheetahs, again, small group.
Number.
They halved the number. Half of them were getting boneless beef plus some supplements to balance out the diet. And the other one, oh, hi.
He's being very loud. I apologize in
Oh,
advance.
no worries.
You're being very, very naughty. Very rude.
He probably has something to contribute.
It's
He's like, yeah, don't give her any ideas of feeding me vegetables. Yeah. Anyway, so they did a study, and half of the animals of the cheetahs were getting boneless beef plus supplements to balance it out, and the other half was getting whole rabbits and they were doing this study for a month.
Mm.
They found that those animals who were eating the whole rabbit, they had more of these short chain fatty acids, and I'll get to those in a little bit and how beneficial they are. And so they had more of those, and they had less of the toxic metabolic chemicals than those that were, well, I guess the ones that were eating the beef plus supplements didn't really have a lot of fiber to begin with, but it seemed like it was the type of fiber that these animals would benefit from. And I think that, in medicine, on life, health in general, the more we can mimic what's happening in what nature provided originally, the more health we can have. And as humans, we've always tried to change things and improve on things, but I think in the process we've made a bit of a mess.
Right.
So I think that if we can mimic that for cats in some ways, I think that would be beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Are there specific life stages that you see with some cats need more? We need to be more cognizant of their fiber needs.
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest. I mean, maybe as they get older because of certain health conditions, if they have a harder time going to the bathroom just because they have arthritis in the hind legs or the back, for example, I could see how providing some extra fiber might just help them go more easily. But
Right.
I think from a nutritional standpoint, they should be able, I would see all life stages requiring the same amount of fiber to be healthy and maintain their microbiome. So it would be more, what the individual situation
Right.
would require.
And probably what they're eating. So, like, if they're eating a really high processed food diet that's not very nutritious versus a really high quality diet that, raw, whatever, I would think that their bodies would absorb more with the higher quality than the highly processed pet food, and overall they're going to have better nutrition, which translates into better overall health, less inflammation, things like that. So more digestibility, things like that. Correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as long as they're healthy,
Yeah.
from one life stage to another,
Mm-hmm.
which, are there life stages? It's like, you're young, you're supposed to stay young, and then you're supposed to die, right? Ideally.
Right?
Because, I mean, we're not supposed to be sick for half our lives.
No.
I mean, unfortunately, it's kind of gone in that direction for many, animals and humans as well, obviously. But we're really supposed to have a pretty good, healthy life, and then just at some point, die in our sleep. Same for cats, because I mean, they can live a long life and a healthy life. But definitely, then once, if things set in, if issues set in, then things need to be adjusted based on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what kinds of fiber do you recommend that people could try? Like, what are your favorite types of go-to fiber sources for cats?
Well, I guess we need to look at, the different types of fibers that are available. And, oftentimes they're really mixed in the same thing, same vegetable, same fruit, whatever.
Yeah.
So we have soluble fibers that are basically dissolving in water, and they make more of a gel-like substance. They're
Mm-hmm.
more digestible, and they tend to draw water into the colon and help to soften up hardened stool, or but also firm up.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like pumpkin, right? Pumpkin,
Mm-hmm.
good for diarrhea and for constipation.
Yeah.
Um, so some of these soluble fibers, they're also more rapidly fermentable, so they're more available to these microbes in the colon.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as a result, then they make more of these short chain fatty acids. And I wanted to get back to those a little bit. These short chain fatty acids are the byproduct of fermentation, but they have a lot of functions in the gastrointestinal tract, but also body wide. They provide about 10% of the body's energy requirement. So they're basically providing energy, and also energy to the gut lining, for example. So they can be very helpful in healing a leaky gut, for example, and or an inflamed gut, so that these enterocytes, these cells of the gut lining, are really tight together.
Mm-hmm.
My fingers, I hate doing this because it's like my fingers should,
Don't match up.
yeah, they don't match up. I'm like, there's still a space. I'm trying to create a non-space, but there's still a space. So, anyways, so
Yeah, there you
there,
go.
or maybe I should do it this way. Tightly connected. Anyway, so it helps with that, but it also helps to send signals to the nerves that innervate the gastrointestinal tract, and those are really
Mm-hmm.
important for whatever is being eaten to move through the gastrointestinal tract and not get stuck somewhere. Um, so there's a lot of that's happening from these short chain fatty acids. They really help mucus production as well. So they're very important as far as integrity and health of the gut lining. So when we have soluble fibers that are in the diet, if as they're consuming it, it will feed these microbes that can then produce these short chain fatty acids. Um, so that's one of the fiber types. And then we also have a non-soluble or insoluble fiber, which is more slowly fermentable or not fermentable at all. And that tends to, that type of fiber tends to not dissolve in water. And so it doesn't really bind with water, and doesn't really relieve diarrhea in that sense because it doesn't bind the water. But what it does is it bulks up things and
Mm-hmm.
help to get things moving a little bit and relieve constipation. So those are the two types of fibers. So depending on what's going on in the gut, you would do a bit more of one or a bit more of the other. But the nice thing is that in nature, most of these fibers are, they come connected I mean, they come in the same plant.
Right? So they share this, like, the same source, and they, like, one source provides a percentage of soluble and insoluble fibers.
Yeah, exactly. And some will have more insoluble and some will have
Mm-hmm.
more soluble fiber. So, for example, vegetables, some of the vegetables like broccoli will have much more insoluble fiber, whereas carrots, for example, have more soluble fibers. So
Mm-hmm.
it would depend a little bit on that. And I think when I posted the announcement that we were doing this today, one lady said that her cat really liked broccoli, and I'm like, what?
Wow.
I'm like, that's interesting. And I mean, I think in the end, cats are so intelligent, and they usually really think that we're not. So,
That's so
or
true.
at least they behave like that.
Yeah.
So I think that watching what they like and offering
Mm-hmm.
them a diversity of different things and see what they gravitate to, I think would be a good way to, for
Test.
one, get them to eat what you want in a way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, also not upsetting their, um, taste buds, I guess.
Right, right. My friend Julianne Thorne is really big on letting cats self-select,
Hmm.
giving them a voice and let them choose, let them decide. So I love the idea of just putting different things out. And, you know, some cats are very curious and they will go up and they'll sniff it, they'll nibble on it. Some cats love spinach, some cats love broccoli. It's not that they're going to eat a whole plate of it, but they're going to eat whatever they feel like their bodies need, and then they're stopped.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So we don't have to worry about them overdosing too much on a particular vegetable because they don't have a need for carbohydrates, but they do have a need for fiber, prebiotic fibers, which is what we're talking about here. Michelle has a question. She said, should the fiber sources be cooked or fed raw? If it's a vegetable, I guess.
Yeah. Well, for example, if we cook potatoes and they're hot, they have a different fiber than when they're cold. You know, if you let them cool down, so they get resistant starches. So, I mean, it's a good question, and to be honest with you, I don't really have the answer to it. I know they are putting a lot more fiber now into some of these prescription diets, and these prescription diets definitely have cooked. I mean,
yeah,
the fiber is not raw. So I think it probably works both ways. And again, for a cat, you have to sort of figure out what they want to eat, because you want to reduce the amount of stress on them and yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
And not have the mealtime become such an adverse time.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are other ways of introducing fiber. I mean, there are little rabbit feet that, you know, have a bunch of fur on them that you could, you know, if they're willing to chew on something like that. I know there are companies that sell mice, ground up mice. I remember I bought a package for my sister's cat once, and he's like, yeah, not that. But I mean, you know, that could be an option. And especially if you have a cat that goes outside, they will also select what they want to eat. They will, I mean, I see my neighbor's cats, they eat grass and all sorts of things, you know, aside from whatever they catch. Well, usually what they catch, they don't eat. They just release it in the house. And then the neighbor has to go chase after some chipmunks.
Oh, no.
Yeah, they bring gifts.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Them, you know, they come in and off they go.
Yeah, like, look, I read a toy.
I know.
Yeah. That what she said made me think of something. So a lot of cats will like to go nibble on grass and they'll eat grass, and then they'll throw up the grass sometimes, but sometimes they don't throw up the grass. So what are your thoughts on grass as fiber sources and all of that when it comes to cats eating grass?
Yeah, definitely grass can be a way of eliminating something that's upsetting the stomach, but in some animals, dogs included, they just like grass. I mean, my neighbor's dog also eats grass and he doesn't go and throw up. I've never seen him throw up. So it's just, they kind of like it, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe it tickles their throat in a particular way. I don't know.
I was listening to a podcast one time with Dr. Karen Becker, and she was saying that they did maybe it was Dr. Mercola did a study, and she was talking about the study that they determined that grass kind of smells like protein, and it breaks down, as you said, in like those fatty acid chains when they're digesting it. And so that makes a lot of sense why cats may like it, because it might smell good. You know what I mean? And then their bodies are telling them through that innate wisdom, it's like, I need some of that.
Yeah, and they usually go for the bigger grasses. They don't usually go for the whatever long grasses.
Correct.
They usually go for the bigger ones.
Yes, with the whiter leaves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, grass looks very tasty, and I figured, well, let's just try. So I ate a bunch, like I just stuffed my face with some grass, and I'm like, half an hour later, I'm still chewing on it.
Right.
It wasn't nearly as juicy as it looks. It's very deceiving.
Yeah. Well, we're not cats and dogs
Yeah, or horses,
or horses. No.
They
Yes,
enjoy it. Why can't I?
that's so true. Um, so what are some other types of fiber sources that pet parents could explore trying with their kitties?
Yeah, so I mean, basically anything that you eat except for onions and, well, I think garlic is sort of okay for cats.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but anything that you would eat, you could offer them a little bit of spinach leaves, ground up carrot maybe, or if they just like to chew on something,
Mm-hmm.
you could do that. I mean, celery, you could try that. Parsley, I mean, anything really.
Yeah.
Uh,
Broccoli sprouts, since somebody
yeah.
said broccoli sprouts are super, super nutritious.
Yeah.
Um, have you ever?
Dandelion greens,
Yes.
they
Yes.
have a bit of both of the slow and um, slow fermenting insoluble fibers, and the others, the faster fermentable ones.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I also heard um, that mushrooms are a really good source of fiber.
hmm Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, mushrooms are great too, and they smell a little less like vegetables.
Mhm. Mhm.
So
Yep.
I can see that cats would, tend to eat those a little bit more readily than vegetables, especially
Mhm.
maybe if you saute them in a little bit of broth or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. I definitely heard that cooking them,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want to cook them
yeah,
first. A
yeah.
little.
They have to be cooked. Yeah, for
Mhm.
humans too, it's better to eat cooked um, mushrooms.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then, even potatoes, cauliflower, nuts, if they will eat some. Um, I mean, they also write whole wheat flour, wheat bran. I'm like, yeah, no, I
Yeah.
don't think so. So you want to definitely stay with organic as much as possible and stay away from all the GMO and,
Correct. Yeah.
sprayed things. But root vegetables can work, a little bit of fruits and I don't know if maybe even eat if they want to eat a little bit of banana or tangerines or, again,
Mhm.
just try it out and see what they like. Psyllium husk is definitely also a good fiber that doesn't really have a lot of taste, so it's easy
Yep.
to hide in the food. Seaweed can also be helpful. Also has fiber in it, and that tastes a little bit more like fish.
Mhm.
Smells a little bit more like that, so that might work. What else? Well, obviously, pumpkin. I think pumpkin is quite well liked by some cats. I wouldn't say many. I don't want to generalize.
Right.
Um,
First.
yeah. Um, Coconut fiber can help as well. Slippery elm can be helpful as well. So there are a lot of them that are less tasty,
Yeah.
less flavorful, I should say.
Michelle asked a question. She goes, "Is there a concern with iodine in seaweed?"
Yeah, I mean, you definitely don't want to overdo it, but in nature, they don't really eat that much fiber, so I'm not sure that you could quite overdo it that way. But certainly, especially if you have a cat that's already hyperthyroid, you definitely don't want to add to that. So I would stay away from fiber of that nature.
Hmm.
Great question, Michelle.
That's a very good question. I used to have a cat years ago. He would love to lick watermelon and
Mm,
and peaches,
mm-hmm,
and he licked bananas,
mm-hmm,
but he never like ate a big chunk. He would just like nibble on it, enough. And I always thought that was the strangest thing because cats aren't supposed
mm-hmm.
to lick,
Yeah.
because they don't really have those a taste for fruits. They don't have a. They're not able to. Are they able to taste sweet? Do you know?
I don't know. I'd have to look that up. I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't think that cats have that much of a sweet tooth.
No, I
Don't see
didn't
them
think
begging
so.
for it generally. Yeah.
Right, right. So I figured it must be something in it that he needed. Maybe it was the fiber. I don't know. I
Mm,
don't know. But I thought that was interesting. Uh,
yeah.
yeah. And
Well,
then,
with cats, you have to be prepared for everything, or
right.
or
And
anything. really.
They like options.
Yeah, exactly. And they like to surprise you, and they like to do exactly the opposite of what you'd like them to do. So
Yes.
there you go. You have to just be flexible with cats.
Yeah. So is there like a specific amount, like a quarter teaspoon or a half a teaspoon, like a day, every other day, would you recommend starting if someone feels like their cat may be struggling to poop a little bit and maybe just adding a little bit of extra fiber, how much and how often would you recommend?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, it will depend a little bit on the situation, but
Mhm.
for example, with psyllium husk, you can do a half a teaspoon per 10 pounds once or twice a day. If they like ground leafy greens, you can also do a teaspoon per 10 pounds a couple times a day, depending. Coconut
Mhm.
fiber, slippery elm, kind of somewhere in the half to a teaspoon per 10 pounds is usually kind of about the recommendation.
Measure. Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Because because obviously we can overdo it, and if
Hmm.
we see them getting constipated, that's a sign we've got to, stop, regroup, back off, um,
Hmm.
not give as much, not give as often until you find that happy balance,
Yeah,
right?
and especially with pumpkin, you have to be a little bit more careful just because it's a little bit more sugary.
Mm,
So if you give too much, then you risk imbalancing the diet because then they would eat less of their regular food.
hmm.
So it could create a bit more of an imbalance that way with pumpkin. Um,
That's a good point.
yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever used pureed cucumbers?
I can't say I have. Do you have a cat that likes it?
No, I have a client that's done that in the past, and I thought, well, that's brilliant.
Hmm.
I never thought of pureed cucumbers. Or I've heard of other squashes besides pumpkin.
Hmm.
Yeah, so I guess you just have to try
Hmm.
different things. Like my cats didn't like coconut very much at all. I
Hmm.
tried.
Hmm.
Um, one tolerated it, and one was like, absolutely not.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
She's very opinionated. Um,
Hmm.
and then sometimes they like pumpkin, and sometimes they don't.
Hmm.
Yeah, it just depends. But
Yeah. Well, it's like with food in general, one day they love whatever you're serving and the next day they're like, "Nope, not eating it." What are you thinking? Why are you serving me this?
yes, that is $1 million question that I hear. Like so many cat parents are just frustrated because they end up having to make a buffet.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
like,
I think
which
that's
one do
not
you want?
in the wild. Cats, they eat whatever they get. They're
Yeah.
not picky. So I think that would be a sign to me that they're having some digestive or maybe a little bit of pancreatic issues,
Hmm.
like low grade inflammation, and they're just not feeling that great. And they're like, yeah, I think I'm going to skip that meal. Uh,
That's a good point.
so I think it's in those cats, it's certainly worth checking out what's going on. Maybe do a fecal test, well, certainly for parasites, doing regular blood work, that's like a given.
Yeah.
But then looking at gut markers, do a microbiome test, maybe do a food sensitivity test, just to see what's going on there,
Hmm.
and adding some digestive support if needed, like enzymes, for example, can be very beneficial. So.
Yeah. Here's something else I just thought of. Okay, like in the people space, you know how we get cravings sometimes?
Hmm.
Like sometimes we just need something sweet, and other times we just need something salty. Sometimes we just really craving some meat or whatever it is. I have heard that that is like your microbiome sending messages to your brains like, I'm a little deficient here, can you help me out? And once you eat something, they're like, okay, craving's gone, I'm happy, I'm good. Do you
Hmm.
think do you think on some level maybe animals do the same thing? Like their microbes are, "Huh, I need a little lamb." You know, you like the lamb. Okay, well, that's enough lamb. I don't need any more lamb right now. Give me something else. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Is it possible that their little microbiomes are acting, sending little messages the same way?
Yeah, most likely because with the studies that they've done in humans, they found that consciousness is not actually coming from the brain, or at least those that are a little way out there.
Yeah, yeah,
Saying that it's not really the brain that's doing all the thinking; it's really all the gut microbes, and that we're just really just a walking piece of
micro.
home for microbes. We're just
Yeah,
the housing for all these microbes, and in the sense we don't really matter.
right. We're just the host.
Yeah, we're just the host. So I could see that in cats maybe the microbes are screaming even louder than in us. I don't know.
Yeah,
uh, but certainly it seems like cats are so in tune and sensitive, and um, they're also different in the sense that, for example, they love energetics that are opposite to ours. So they will lay on computers, they will lay on electrical cords or whatever.
mhm.
They're kind of like the unnatural, unhealthy energy lovers in that sense. So if you know that if your cat is laying somewhere all the time, don't go lay there because it's not a good place for you. So I'm wondering if, because they're so sensitive and different than other species, um, yeah, that they just function differently, from a digestive perspective and every other perspective as well. I mean, I jokingly call them the aliens just because they're so different,
They are, and they're hard to read sometimes
hmm
because they don't act like dogs. you know, they are not small dogs. They hide their feelings, they hide their emotions. Sometimes they hide when they're not feeling well. So
hmm
they become very like chameleons. They just want to blend in. Don't look at me, because their their lineage, their genes are like they were they are predators, but they also can be prey. So
hmm
they um they like to hide when their weakness. If they're not feeling well, they don't want you to know necessarily.
hmm
I think that's just the way they're genetically wired for protection.
yeah, yeah. Plus, they also seem to be more aware on many levels.
100%.
I mean, they walk around with, I don't know, it's a sense that I get. They just know things.
Hmm.
They just know, and they know a whole lot more than I do.
And they see things we can't see.
Yeah, that too. And so I think they're walking around probably shaking their heads constantly about us humans,
Right?
Like, we need so much help. We humans are just, oh my God. I mean, that's the sense I'm getting from them. And it's kind of like they sort of tolerate us. They want to help us, but it's really hard for them to hang out. I mean, not all of them, but you can
Right.
tell that, yeah, they're
They,
doing us a service.
they can have a bit of an attitude sometimes for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
And they get their feelings hurt if we don't like fix whatever they're upset about, and like we're supposed to understand what they're upset about.
right, exactly.
And then they hold it against us, and then they get mad.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
Mr. Yelling over here. I think he wants to go in the backyard, and I'm like, nope, you're not going out right now.
Yeah, he wants to go eat his grass.
He wants to go eat some. Yes, he ate his food, but I think he wants to go back out. Who knows? I'll
Yeah,
have to figure that out.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but they can be very much a mystery,
hmm
and they can be very picky, finicky eaters.
hmm
Um, I would have to think out of all the research coming out with the human microbiome and looking in the pet space, because there is so much emotional intelligence in the gut, in the microbes. I would, I feel like there has to be some connection between why they're finicky and their emotional status and all of that with their gut. So I just feel like there is a connection, like you were saying, on some level. There's, and it can fluctuate from day to day.
Mm-hmm.
But if you consistently have struggles with GI issues and food issues and things like that, I thank you for just reminding us that it is a good idea to do those tests,
Mm-hmm.
do the fecal test, do the microbiome test, do the food sensitivity test, and that can give you a lot of insight as to what's going on inside the body that we can't see,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
shed some light on some things
Yeah.
and help.
Yeah. And it's good to do that because, I was reminded of that. A client of mine has a cat, and he had been picky for quite some time. And, you know, all of a sudden he basically died, had some big tumor in his GI tract, and, that was it.
Wow.
So we just have to kind of pay attention and not just necessarily toss it up to, well, they're just picky and they're difficult and
Mhm.
such, but maybe start looking a little deeper. And because they are more spiritually awakened than we are, and in many cases they will also mirror and basically show us what's going on with us, and if
Yes.
we're stressed out all the time running around, they may mirror that right back at us, and
Mhm.
because I guess one way or one result of being picky would be that you have to spend a whole lot more time figuring out what your cat wants. So basically, they're making you slow down on some level, which is rather unpleasant for those who have a picky cat, because that can be driving you crazy. But I think it's also an invitation to ask for guidance and help, and say, I don't know, help, and then see what the cat comes up with, because they can come up with things. And cats have, we know they have 9 lives, right? So they can be at death's door, and then all of a sudden they decide, oh, I think I'm going to live a little longer, and they perk back up, and they're all good again,
Mhm.
Whereas a month or two ago they were like skeletons, basically. So I think we always have to ask beyond the obvious, and see what's going on. I mean, you do a lot of animal communication, right? So, or
I
energy work.
energy work, yeah, energy work for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm. But I have really good communicators. I think communication, animal communication is so valuable.
Hmm.
Getting the pet's perspective on
Yeah.
things is is it's crazy, but it's so helpful.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
so helpful.
Because, we're good at talking to them, but we're not so good at listening.
Correct.
So, and
And they
that
have a lot
is,
to
yeah.
say.
Sorry.
They can have a lot to say.
Yeah, exactly. And so they may just drive you crazy because they don't want to eat. But that may just be their way of saying, hello, I'd like you to listen for a second,
Mhm.
and then see what comes up. But that requires to sit still for a minute, which for us humans with our busy brains, it's not easy. I
No,
tried to meditate, it's not working very well.
right, right. No, it's true. It's
Mhm.
true.
Yeah.
Um, well, does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Suter about the fiber or their diets, with their cats, anything like that? Dr. Suter, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us about today's topic that we need to be aware of?
I mean, certainly when we're talking about fiber, I think it's also important that we get good quality fiber, because a lot of these pet foods that have higher amounts of fiber, they will use things like beet pulp,
Mhm.
peanut hulls, wheat, and things like
Cellulose.
that. And yeah, a lot of those have more chemicals in it,
Mhm.
so they're they're coming with their own set of problems, so we don't want to make things worse.
Right.
Definitely want to keep feeding them a clean diet. Um, I made some notes here. Let me see if there's anything else that we haven't talked about. One caveat was that giving too much fiber can cause bigger poops and then decrease the absorption of nutrients. So giving too much of it is probably not great either. And I just talked to someone today, and she said that she adds a little psyllium husk to her cat's meals, and if she gets, because of constipation, but when she gives too much, then there's just blowout diarrhea.
Oh, wow.
So
That's interesting.
yeah.
That's definitely not what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And the poor cats, they're like, what are you doing to me?
Yeah, well, it's that or
Yeah.
not getting it out.
Right.
And then, especially in cases of megacolon or chronic constipation, trying to find out what the underlying cause is, because,
Mm-hmm.
for example, a cat who is on medication for hyperthyroidism or had the thyroid irradiated, they can go hypothyroid, and then digestion also slows down, and they can get constipated for that.
Okay.
Looking at pain, if they need an adjustment, for example, just to help them be more comfortable so that they can poop without having to be in pain, for example. So there, if there are issues, it's always good to do a full workup to figure out what the underlying cause is, rather than just, putting band-aids on things, for example.
Right.
So it's always good to get cats examined, even though it can be challenging. But there's definitely ways to make it a little bit more pleasant or less unpleasant, maybe would be the word, for them, because there are things that can be going on for a while and be a bit undetected. And so if we are proactive and looking at things and taking care of things, that can be really helpful, because there are definitely a few factors that can play into this. One of my patients, Captain was his name, he's a huge cat, and he had megacolon, or was chronically constipated, basically. So every other week he'd show up at the clinic not being able to poop. And so in the end, what happened to be the issue for him was that his heart was beating too slowly and he needed a pacemaker.
Oh,
So
wow.
once he had the pacemaker, then his constipation issues resolved.
Interesting. That
Yeah.
is so
So
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to do a full exam. You have to really look at everything, uh, to make sure you figure out the underlying cause, because sometimes it can be an easy fix, like in this cat. Well, I mean, I don't think it's easy to put a pacemaker in a cat. I mean, I've never done it, so I don't even know how they do it. But
Right.
anyways, any heart type of thing is not really easy, but
Wow, that's incredible.
yeah, just figuring it out.
Yeah, for people who are not familiar with what megacolon is, can you share that?
Yeah, megacolon is basically where there's a congenital form where they can just be born with and have defects in the nerves that innervate the muscles of the colon, because
Mhm.
peristalsis happens through innervation of these muscles, so they move along. So if that's not working properly, then the poop just gets accumulated in there, and then the colon gets bigger, bigger, and bigger and bigger. It's kind of like people who don't go to the bathroom for weeks. I
Ugh.
mean, they have literally a shitload.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's all uncomfortable.
Yeah. So anyway, so with cats with megacolon, anyways, there's just poop that accumulates, and it can become rock hard, where
Mhm.
in the end they have to have surgery to have the colon removed in order to be able to, have a life,
Yeah.
because otherwise they're just ending up at the hospital every few weeks or so, just,
Ugh.
with having a huge, accumulation of poop in there, which is not ideal.
No.
So definitely constipation needs to be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
For
Yeah.
sure. Dogs, I don't know. I don't think I've ever heard of megacolon in a dog, but cats definitely. Um, yeah.
That's really interesting because you don't want stuff sitting in there that long because it starts to reabsorb all those toxins and stuff just get reabsorbed and
Mhm. Yeah, it doesn't make them feel good.
no, it's very
Yeah. Yeah.
uncomfortable.
And then they can also start vomiting.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't move through very
Yes,
well
like
anymore.
blockage.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so you want to figure out things because what could be the problem with megacolon is also that they could have a foreign body, like in the colon itself, like bones, plant material, hair, or just a tumor that's growing in there, or a diverticulum, for example, as well. So you want to definitely have them checked out to make sure it's not something more serious that needs to be taken care of.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's a great point.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
that's
I mean, yeah, when in doubt, always do some diagnostics. I think that's the least or the most forgotten aspect of veterinary care is, we need to do diagnostics to figure out what's going on.
mm-hmm.
Um,
We do have a question. Mary says, "Are there any recommendations to support the anal glands? My 13-year-old kitty's anal glands aren't emptying. She's not on dry food, but cooked, wet, and dehydrated raw with the Dorothy's products. She has constipation issues with anal gland issues."
yeah, I mean, definitely doing a workup on what's going on. Is there food sensitivity going on? What's the thyroid doing? Is there a microbiome imbalance? Because anal glands are often, in a way, they're considered part of the skin when it comes to allergies. So oftentimes they can be having issues because there's just an inflammation in the body.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course, there could also be the fact that maybe they got squeezed a bit too much, and maybe there's some scar tissue, and so the hole where the anal gland fluid is coming out is not as big as it was. And then the consistency of it in there as well. But I often see big anal glands that, well, more so in dogs than cats, where it's just liquid that accumulated, and so maybe they're not putting enough pressure on these anal glands when they poop, so it doesn't empty them out well enough. Another part that can also be an issue would be innervation to that area. So if the muscles of that sphincter anal area are not squeezing enough or strong enough, that may also be why they wouldn't express in the process. And that, all muscles are innervated and the nerves come from the spine. So
Mm-hmm.
if it's a spinal issue, that needs a little bit of chiropractic care. I mean, it may not need all that much. And that would certainly be
That's
very helpful.
yeah. I was just say that's a great recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think,
Especially at
always start
13-year-old.
with the basics. Always start with the basics. That's what I keep saying. Start with basics. Make sure the innervation to everything is working well. Um, Feed them a good diet. Look at GI health. Look at the microbiome. Support that, and then, well, down the road, then do a little bit of detox and things like that as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then fitness and exercise is important because I think a lot of cats are laying around way too much, especially, more so the indoor cats. So getting them to move is important as well,
Yeah.
doing some exercising with them.
Mm-hmm. And a 13-year-old kitty is it's not an old kitty, but it's considered a mature,
Mhm.
senior. And so those cats can have more, they could jump down wrong and just land a little off, and then just a little subluxation kind of throws things out of balance. And then you have the pinched nerve communication again from the spine into that region that's just not quite, the message isn't quite going through like it should be. So I love chiropractic work. It's really
Mhm.
a game changer for
Yeah.
folks.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think it's a my one of my first go-tos. I mean, if not the first go-to, because there's so many things that you can fix just with a chiropractic adjustment that
Mhm.
you would have given like a bunch of supplements for years and you would still not have fixed it.
Yeah.
So that's always a go-to, because if that doesn't fix it, then we have to look further. But that's not very invasive. It doesn't cost a lot of money.
Mhm.
It gives instantaneous sort of response, because either it works or it doesn't work.
Yep.
Sure, sometimes it takes more than one treatment depending on what's going on. But
Mhm.
I use it as a diagnostic tool. If I
Oh,
can make a difference with it, great. If not, then I need to keep looking.
That's a
With something
great
else. So,
idea.
yeah.
I wish we had more veterinary chiropractors. I truly wish more people would do that
Mhm.
training. It's so valuable.
Yeah.
It's so
Well, I
valuable.
mean, there are people. I mean, if anyone is looking, they can check the AHVMA,
Mhm.
American Holistic Veterinary Organization.
I know I never can get it right.
Yeah.
AHVMA.
American Holistic Veterinary Medical Association, not
Yeah.
organization. That's association.org. That's probably why I got the organization in there.
Yep.
It's .org, and then AVCA, which is the American Veterinary
Chiro.
Chiropractic
Yeah, I think
Association,
association,
probably.
something like that. Mhm.
To check. But just like in humans, there are chiropractors and there are chiropractors. There are some that take 3 minutes and they adjust everybody the same way pretty much. And then there are some who take a little bit more time and actually look at the nervous system and how it works and how it connects and why, asks why. And um,
Mhm.
so, yeah, there are different kinds,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Well, this has been so interesting. I really appreciate your time and thank you so much for sharing with us all your knowledge about fiber in cats, because I think it's easy to overlook it
Mm-hmm.
in the grand scheme of things with nutrition and foods and
Mm-hmm.
cats in general. So thank you so much.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, and thanks for having me, and thanks for the good questions
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
from you and them.
thank you guys so much for joining us. If you have additional comments or questions, if you're watching this after we stream, just drop them in. And Dr. Suter will be sharing this video as well. So
Mm-hmm.
happy to answer your questions and get back to you. So again, thank you. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your week. And we will be back again soon with more fun events. So thank you, Dr. Suter. Have a great night.
You too.
And
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
bye, everybody.